Basically, what we wanted to talk about is the sort of expectations which you deal with in your everyday life, and how did you learn to ignore them or deal with them or do whatever is that thing which you are doing with them. I think that's very interesting for everybody who is expecting something of you, especially.
Well, it's an interesting concept to talk about what people are expecting of me in an interview and about my own expectations in that regard. My expectations have transformed entirely since I was young. Without going into the detailed description of my history, when I was youthful, had full of energy, had a lot of energy and things like that, I was expecting to do a lot of athletics. I was always doing athletics. I wanted to play, if possible, higher level baseball, and had gone into, I had started that path and actually got somewhere, not very far, but got somewhere. But then I lost the capacity to use my arm. Later on I found out it's because I have some defect in the bone structure. But my expectation of playing baseball was hindered by my physical disability. And also I had problems with my ankle. Then I wanted to play music, but my expectation was transformed by my desire to engage in spirituality, which transformed my whole life into a totally different direction. During my times in the spiritual realm, I found that my expectations were not very important. Rather, I was trying to fulfill the expectations of others. For example, my authorities. And that was, I would say, a very challenging time, because sometimes their expectations were perhaps inappropriate or unreasonable or not practical, or whatever variety of that you could add. Sometimes I was very inspired by the expectations, so I worked hard to fulfill them and actually managed to do that, especially in regard to what my guru at that time had said. And I was very, in one sense, satisfied that I was accomplishing those things which I had been expected to do. And that should have made me quite happy. But the more I would accomplish, the more I would understand that there was need to accomplish. And yet at the same time, the expectations on me as a person transformed from somebody who everyone expected to get things done to somebody who everybody expected to solve all the problems of all their lives and the structure within which they lived. And it became very difficult to fulfill everyone's expectations, because I started having my own vision of things. And then I started to develop my own expectation of what should be. The problem with that is I have very high expectations. So I wanted to make everything right, which was very difficult to do in the first place. And secondly, considering the situation, it was an impossible task. So at one point, I suppose it's open history, my entire vision of what it was that I should expect out of my own life and what others can expect out of their own lives changed from practically 180 degree, changed in 180 degrees. And I didn't really know how to deal with my own personal expectations at that time. My expectations of myself were, I would suppose, put on hold. And for quite some time, I didn't really expect anything. But then I started thinking back on what had happened in my life, and I was thinking that you know, having expectations never really worked for me, or having a dream, for instance. I know that having a dream and having an expectation are not exactly the same, because expectations could be in very short-term situations where you expect that something will taste good, or you expect that you'll make some money out of an endeavor you do. Whereas a dream usually is considered to be something very long-term, which you have to fulfill, like a vision or something like this. But in my case, my idea of expectation is that minute by minute, moment by moment, it should be the best it can be, or I should be the best I can be, or that whatever happens is exactly precisely at this moment should really manifest exactly what I feel it is according to its potential. And I stopped dreaming. You know, they say that you can't fulfill your dreams until you wake up. And perhaps I started to think that all these ideas of accomplishment, all these ideas of fulfilling others' expectations, or these ideas of having goals and long-term visions and missions and so on, was perhaps to a certain extent a dream, because circumstances around you change so radically, you may not even feel after a while that you should have such a mission. Now, I thought like this when I was a teenager, and that was the way I thought. But having come back full circle to this idea that really the present, what's exactly in front of us at the moment, and the way we deal with that is the most important thing. And to expect something from it is to a certain extent strangling the moment. It's almost as if you have a tube of toothpaste and you're trying to squeeze out of it tomato sauce. It's okay, you have this expectation, and expectations are not bad, to have tomato sauce, or to have a dream to put some tomato sauce on something. But that you're squeezing a tube of toothpaste to get it is kind of like squeezing a moment which hasn't been defined yet and trying to come out with some kind of expectation. Now, I know that's not a very perfect example, and it has imperfections in a million ways, because after all, if you really want to have some tomato sauce come out of it, you would get a tube, they sell here in America, tomato sauce in a tube. You would buy that particular thing. And that, after all, we do work all the time to create moments. Yet, we don't really do that. Okay, like, for example, to set up an interview, so many lights have to be placed, and the microphones and the situation, yet at the same time, what is going to be said is totally undefined. Even if someone were to script it, or even if it was scripted and I followed a script, my personal feeling while doing it may be contrary to what I thought it should be. And maybe I want to throw it all away, because I'm not a professional actor. That's not my expectation. It is my expectation, if I were to answer a question, that I would do it justice. I would really answer the question. I would really accomplish what I was asked to do. And that's my expectation. But I have a dream in my life that I have to answer people's questions. I don't expect that of me. I don't expect that I have to answer your questions. Sometimes even I would rather ask you another question, or force you to think about these questions so you answer your own questions. Actually, I do expect that you answer your own questions. I do expect that you find your own experiences. I do expect that you find your own way. But that's not like my dream. I don't dream anymore. And that's the main change, I think. I don't dream. I have no dreams. If you ask me, do I expect to accomplish something? No. Do I need to do it? No. What do I like to do? A few things, but I don't dream that I should do what I like to do. I don't expect I do what I like to do. So when you talk about expectations, I'm sorry, this is a very long answer. It's very difficult to give a very precise answer, but the general answer I might give to summarize would be that I don't really have longer term expectations. I rather try to live right now and act in a way so that very short term expectations, which obviously lead to a comfortable life or a life that works. But I'm more concerned with fulfilling the moment than I am of fulfilling a dream.
What about the expectations of others on you? Because you were talking more about your own expectations of yourself.
Well, that's the change. People had expectations on me, and I used to try to fulfill them. I don't do that anymore. Do you know, some strange thing about me was that when, let's say I would be with somebody who's very negative towards me and would really want me to screw up or fail or do something wrong, or they would even expect me to do it, I would sometimes do that to fulfill their expectations. That stopped when I had a lot of responsibility, was when it wasn't just me involved. When it was just me involved, it didn't matter to me if I failed in your eyes. If you expected me to do so and I failed, there was no gain, no loss for anybody. You got what you expected, and it didn't really matter to me. And I wasted less time by trying to prove you wrong. I know that's kind of a very strange thing to say. But when responsibility came, more responsibility came, and it wasn't just me, and there were other things depending on it, other people depending on me, which I cared about, then I no longer did that. That I would, if I saw somebody dealing with me like that, then I would make an attempt to transform their way of thinking, or just place them aside, set them aside, get them out of the way, because they were conflicting with what needed to be done, which was the fulfillment of our expectations. Nowadays, I don't really see other people's expectations of me as a motivating factor in the same way. Okay, so I'm doing an interview and people may expect that something interesting is happening. But I'm mainly concerned with honestly expressing it rather than trying to fulfill somebody's idea of entertainment. I don't necessarily have to say something which you find pleasant or pleasing or entertaining, although I don't mind telling a joke. I like humor, I like laughter. But when it comes to actually defining me, I will define me. Not that I will be so vague in my own self-definition that others will define me, because I haven't done it. So they fill the void of definition by their own idea, instead of me declaring what it is and thus filling that void with what I consider to be my truth. So let's say other people expect me to solve a problem. Well, if I can, and if I have the energy to do so, I will do it as much as I can. That doesn't mean I will solve it, but I will endeavor to do so, because it's not just their expectation, it's my desire as well. But sometimes, like when I was broadcasting, I might come into the broadcast with my head spinning. I may have, because I'm the tech person too, so I may have been fighting with the technology for 2 or 3 or more hours before I would sit down. And I sometimes only got it together 2 minutes before I turned on the broadcast. And I had to sit there and pretend like there was nothing, but my head inside was spinning with the programming of it, the hardware of it, the conflict of it, or whatever. So others had of course, every person who broadcasts has the same situation, but they don't have to do the technology of it. So it's hard for me to be honestly expressing when my mind is somewhere else totally. And I think that what really happened to me in January was I had to sit down and say, I can't do this alone anymore. I'm doing a burden which if anybody else would try to duplicate what I was doing with the simultaneous intercontinental translation, being recorded, being stereo broadcast, I mean, they may think when they see it, oh, it seems easy, but anyone who's tried to duplicate it pulls their hair out. It's a mind-boggling task. Of course, okay, I got to perfect it, but now I can tell you it might be easy. But to get to that point and to make it work, and it's so difficult. And everybody's expectation, I would say, something new every week, something interesting every week, something relevant every week. It started to wear me down. I used to worry all week long. What am I going to say? All week long, I'm telling you, what topic will I talk about? I've already talked about so many topics. So I came to the point of saying that this is a contradiction to my energy as a person, where my whole life has to be dictated by something that happens Saturday morning. And it's really not right, because I'm not able to not only express myself honestly and properly, but I'm not able to be of help to others, if that's what I wish to do. And sometimes you can't be of help to others. Sometimes it's just not practical, or sometimes there's no way to do it. So fulfilling the expectations of others is not exactly a major, it's not of major importance to me right now. What's of major importance to me right now is whatever I do, it has to honestly express what I am. That's my personal expectation. And I don't know if others share that. And sometimes I think they don't. I've seen that when I write and others read it, they like it from that point of view, because it's an honest expression. And when they appreciate it, I feel very good about that. Or when I play music, and it's really an expression of me, not just me trying to play some notes which fit into, but I mean really something that expresses it, that I feel good about. And when they appreciate it, I like that a lot. I know there are people who have all kinds of expectations which are wild fantasies and dreams which have nothing to do with me whatsoever. I don't even think about that. That has no relationship to me. It's just I get stuck in my face every now and then. I just push it aside. I don't push it aside. I place it aside. It's not very significant. But as far as, other expectations, if they correspond to what I am as a person, then they can be fulfilled. Otherwise, not. So I suppose it's just growing up process.
Okay, what are you as a person? How do you define yourself?
Oh, I never think about it in that term. I don't define myself in words. I don't define myself in concepts even.
But if I have to introduce you to somebody, what should I say? This is Kari, he is what?
Yeah, that's impossible. I know many people here in Gainesville, when they want to introduce me, they have an enormously difficult time, because just like one friend says, you've lived at least five lifetimes. Ordinarily people, they do one thing or two things or whatever. You've done so many different things that you've basically lived 5 or 6 lifetimes. So how do you say what you are? I mean, I could say I'm so many things, but none of those things really define me as a person. I'm somebody who likes to, or somebody who does like that, or somebody who expresses themselves in this way, or who desires like this or that. It's not really, I would not be able to be defined by profession. I would not be able to be defined by a level of IQ or EQ or any Q you want to talk about. I'm somebody who's willing to just be in a moment, and yet at the same time is always afraid that the coming up moment will be a disaster, so he's always arranging things so it won't be. I worry a lot. Yes, but I'm a creative person, but not all the time. Sometimes I like to just sit back and be a passive person. I like to just meditate and just receive. Or I like to just lay down and just tune to the stations everywhere. If you understand that point. It's like, I just lay there and I'm just tuning to different stations which are broadcasting. And I know that's a very passive thing, but it's kind of, I don't know. It's what I do every now and then. It's like you feel energies being projected on you. And if you try to ignore them, you have to do so much effort. You have to expend so much energy to ignore them, to bounce them off. But sometimes I just tune to them and see what they have to say. And then it has no longer an effect. It's almost like when there's this great pain placed upon you and you... I had, because of my bad back, I went to a neuromuscular therapist, and it's always pain. It's never fun to go to there, but it's a good result. So as this guy was like drilling into my back and making me literally scream, especially on certain nerves in the leg, I found myself instantly pushing it away, which is the natural reaction. Pain, oh, go away. But it doesn't go away. So you're basically fighting, losing, and the pain is there anyway. So then again, I went into this technique of just accepting it and just feeling it. And within a very short period of time, it didn't affect me in the same way. So I do that with energies coming. I tune to them. Just see what they're saying. What's the point of it? It's kind of... I'm a very esoteric person in the sense of, for me, like, for example, this moment is not defined by what I'm saying right here to you. It's defined by, for example, energies in the room, or even that could be personified, or energies which trail in history, or energies which are beyond time in the sense that they're in such a different time scale, you can't even relate it to what we know as time. This is just my normal passive state of perception. And then at the same time, I'm capable, and I desire, to move into action. I like to, as you might have noticed, we do some gardening. So that's action. I like it. And I have no problem with saying, okay, you can do like that, and you can do like this, and you can do it, and here's how you do it here, and that's what you do there. And I can make big plans, and I can organize quantities of this and that, and those materials, and researching what would be the best way to do it, and making a scheme and a plan, and then executing it. So I'm this kind of contrast of passive being and extreme doing. Now that doesn't say anything, because everybody is. But the unique character of any individual, especially me, is the way these two meet. So I, as my discipline, because somebody may say, well, what are you as a person in the sense of what do you endeavor to be? My discipline is to have the doing as an extension of my being, not that the doing is imposed upon my being. So I will not act unless it's an extension of my being. Of course, I'm forced, like everybody's forced, to do things which they don't like to do simply because of the circumstances, but I never commit, or rather get entangled, or place any real emotion into it. It's just... I've seen, like when I play, let's say, guitar, I'm not a very good musician. So if I'm playing something I don't really care about, I see myself playing some boxes. I hear myself moving into patterns which are thoughtless. And it sounds lousy. And then at the same time, when my being is captured by it, because music is like that. Music, they've even proven this with, they did instantaneous scans of 5 very famous musicians while they were playing. And they showed that the brain pattern was exactly similar to that dreaming state. And that not only were the certain intuitive parts of the brain illuminated, as you would expect in the right side, but there were illuminations in the scan of smell or sight. or other sensory perceptions which were not related to the sound. In other words, it opened up a whole new kind of emotive, energetic stimulation of a person. So when I'm in that state where the being is connected to it, then I don't really care how good or bad I am. It really reflects what I am as a person, and I love it. So for me, I love to be or to act in that which really express my being. So that's my creative nature. I don't know if I answered the question. It wasn't really a, what are you or what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a this or I want to be a that. I don't really care.
You said earlier that you described the way you deal with pain. Can we somehow, widen this and say that this is basically the way you can deal with anything in your life? Like first you get this shock initial and you try to fight it, and then you accept it and, get in contact with it.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. You get a shock, and you reject it, or you push it away, or you fight with it, struggle. And then when you accept it, then you can deal with it properly, and then you get to the point of peace. That's actually a discipline. That's actually a very good summary of how one can live one's life. I don't necessarily do that all the time. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say, that's the way I do everything, or that's my discipline. Sometimes I just block it out. I know that's not dealing with it, that's not accepting. I just block it out. If something's coming at me which I just can't deal with, I just shut it down. I shut down my sensitivity. I shut down my connections. I shut down my responses. I just shut down until it's cooled off or it's passed or something like that. And I'm aware, obviously, and energy is flowing in, but I just don't respond to it. So that's not very, I suppose, evolved, but it's my self-defense, which is important too. But when I really find that something's important, I will, at one point, accept it and deal with it. And usually I find a way through. There again, you find your way through. You get a success, a momentary success, one of the hundreds of thousands of everyday little successes that appear through after struggling hard to deal with something you need to deal with, and you feel good for 10 seconds or whatever. And then, okay, we move on. Again, it's expectations. I don't expect to be in this state of samadhi where I'm so much present in the now that I'm accepting everything that's going on around me, because then I'll be forced to accept animal slaughter, forced to accept the slaughter of human beings, forced to accept economic exploitation, forced to accept the rape of the earth, forced to accept ecological disaster, forced to accept global warming, forced to accept disease. I don't want to continue on that long list that everybody knows. So I'd be forced to accept all of these things. And then what do? Well, somebody who's, let's say, an activist would say, then you have to do something about it. Yeah, but here I'm faced with 100 different things. If I tried to do something about every one of these things, I'd go broke. Or I would go crazy or get exhausted. And then I would then have to be forced to be in the situation of using one of these things as my livelihood. Like many doctors, some are nice, but some use the medical conditions of others as a means to make money, or even dentists, lawyers. They're similar. Your pain is their gain. So you go into a medical field because you're idealistic. I don't know very many people who try to be a doctor because they know they're going to make a lot of money, because it's a long time education and you get a lot of debts and you have a lot of challenges, and there are malpractice insurance and rents and people you have to pay. And then you have to work long hours and you're always on call until you get to that point where you're so elevated, exhausted, nobody bugs you anymore. So honestly, I don't think the economic motive was there in the beginning to the degree I think people think it is. There's a lot of idealism there, the idea to be good, but then it can transform in many senses to, yeah, okay, I'll do this idealism and I'll make a lot of money too. And then the money starts to take over. And you start, for example, prescribing medicines that the drug reps told you to prescribe, even though you know they're not very good. Or you start putting caps on teeth that shouldn't be capped. Or you do other kinds of things which, put your kids through college, pay your tax bill, get your wife the things she needs to have, or etc. So there are many people who go into things with an idealistic point of view and maybe want to do something because they feel sensitive. And then they become part of the problem, not part of the solution. They become part of the ideal of exploitation. And I see that all the time. I even see that amongst people who work in environmental things, ecological things. There are many people right now who are making organic foods, which are not really so. But it sells good. Or things that are supposed to be healthy, which are not so, but they sell good. Take lots of vitamins. They're supposed to be good for you, but they find out the hypervitamization, or whatever you call it, too many vitamins, just as bad, worse, give more diseases. But it makes money, so we're not going to tell you that, or whatever. So I find that there are so many ways you can get captured. And it's not like I don't want to do anything, but what I want to do is what's right in front of me, without it being part of my economic survival. If I had to speak like this because it was my economy, I would lose my capacity to speak honestly. I would not allow myself to insult anybody. I would not allow myself to speak in such a way which would be considered conflicting of others' interests. I would have to massage and help and work with and please various interests so that they would pay me more, so I could travel and do more and earn more. And so I'm in conflict. I like that Brahminical standard in Vedic culture, where Brahmanas don't work for anybody. Nobody owns them. You can't buy them. You can't manipulate them. They tell you the truth as they know it. Then you have another problem, that when you do that, you always have to be right. So then you argue with other Brahmanas to show that you know more. And then you get into the academic thing where you're better, superior, no more. But then I want to bring that to the point of the knowledge has to be useful for others. Not that it's just you know more of it, but rather what you do know affects people positively, impacts the world positively. I forgot what I'm answering. I went on a soapbox. I have this soapbox complex,
Okay, so how do we resolve this kind of conflicts? For example, if we talk about charity or helping other people, where do you draw the line where it stops being, you giving off last money which you have and having nothing to feed your family because somebody needs this money more because they need some surgery?
Same exact problem I just talked about. You see people are suffering and you feel badly. How is it that I have and they don't? So then you get into this problematic situation. If you have others who depend on you, if I give away everything, I've got nothing for me and for them. What do? Well, logic and common sense says that you give that which doesn't cause you hardship. You give to the degree that it doesn't cause you hardship. If I have, for instance, extra food and I can't eat it, and I give it to somebody in charity, it's not that there's a law that says charity has to hurt. If you have extra and you give it to others, that's fine. Now, of course, some people get benefit from that. Like you give money, you have extra money, give money, you get a tax break on it. Or it keeps you under a certain level or so on. Well, that's not necessarily so bad. I mean, after all, the point is you've got more than you need, or what you have is not going to be necessarily good for you. You give it to someone who does need. And that's okay. So obviously common sense would say that which is over and above your requirement or the requirement of your situation, if you give in charity, it doesn't cause you hardship. And maybe even it might cost you hardship, but you may want to do it. Let's say, for example, in times of great crisis where other people are really starving and you could live with less, you would consider giving it. One thing about people in America is that they are the most generous people on the planet. Like during the tsunami, they, as a people, gave more than any government combined. The American people, just as people, just as human beings who said, you know, maybe we don't have enough money, but these people are destroyed and we want to help. So they gave of themselves enormous amounts of funds. And yet there are others who, you know, governments or whatever want to proclaim themselves so great for giving so much, but it didn't come anywhere near that endeavor. So there are times when, yes, you just want to say yes. My life may be hindered or my life may be impacted in a very, it may make difficulty for me, but I'm willing to do it because these people are suffering and they really need it. So you have to make that choice personally.
So basically you are saying that every time you have to decide, because, you know, in some religions, for example, in Judaism, there is a general rule.
That's called tithing. Yeah. You give 10%, 15% or whatever. Now, the concept of tithing is a concept basically based on the fact that most people don't have the discipline to give to others. They may become greedy or they may become self-interested. So therefore, to help them do it right, they should give a certain percentage. In other words, how much should I give? That's the question. How much should I give? So they say, okay, give 15%, or they give 10%, or whatever. So these numbers don't relate to every individual. They're just generic numbers to help you have a guideline what to do. Now, sometimes that's turned into a law. It becomes a social law. If you don't do it, they look down on you. I don't think that's right. But anyway, I'm not here to transform those numbers. But my feeling for every individual to make the proper choice is that you do what you feel you can do. And you have to have a good reason to do it.